The world of the bold and the beautiful has always thrived on the fragile illusion that the past can be buried, rewritten, or mourned into silence. Engagement parties, weddings, and celebrations are often staged as proof that life moves forward, that love conquers history, and that pain, if endured long enough, will eventually loosen its grip. Yet the most devastating truths in this universe never remain buried. They wait. They gather strength in absence. And when they return, they do not knock. They arrive fully formed, demanding recognition, reshaping every relationship they touch. Luna's sudden appearance at the engagement celebration of Will Spencer and Electra Forrester is not merely a shocking twist. It is a reckoning that collapses the boundary between grief and reality, memory and consequence, love and irreversible truth. The engagement itself is designed to symbolize certainty. Will and Electra stand before family and friends, believing they have survived the most dangerous chapters of their young lives. Their love has been tested by secrets, threats, and the lingering shadow of Luna, the woman everyone believed to be gone forever. Her presumed death had been absorbed into the family narrative as tragedy, a loss that demanded mourning but also closure. In that belief, Will and Electra allowed themselves to imagine a future unburdened by unfinished business. The ring, the smiles, the carefully chosen words of commitment are not performative. They are acts of faith that the past will remain where it belongs. That faith shatters the moment Luna appears. She does not enter as a ghost or a rumor, but as a living woman, visibly altered by survival and carrying undeniable proof that time did not stop when the world believed she died. In her arms is a newborn child, fragile and real, whose existence immediately rewrites history. Luna's voice does not tremble when she speaks. She does not ask for permission to be heard. She states, with devastating calm, that the baby is Will's son, the child everyone believed was lost through miscarriage, the child whose absence shaped months of grief and regret. This declaration does not merely interrupt the celebration, it dismantles it, replacing joy with disbelief, certainty with terror, and hope with the crushing weight of consequence. For Will, the moment fractures his sense of self. He is no longer simply a young man pledging his future to the woman he loves. He becomes, in an instant, a father confronted with a living responsibility he believed had been taken from him by fate. The shock is not only emotional but existential. Everything he thought he knew about his past choices is suddenly incomplete. His grief, once genuine, now feels contaminated by ignorance. His relief at surviving loss is replaced by guilt so sharp it borders on paralysis. He does not yet know how to respond as a man, a partner, or a father, only that nothing will ever be simple again. Electra's reaction is quieter, but no less devastating. Her worst fear has always been that love, no matter how sincere, can never fully escape history. Luna's return transforms that fear into reality. Electra is forced to confront the one outcome she could never prepare for, a future in which Will is bound to another woman forever, not by choice or a lingering affection, but by a child. This is not a rival she can compete with, nor a past mistake that can be forgiven and closed. It is a permanent connection, legally and emotionally inescapable. In that instant, Electra realizes that her engagement ring, once a symbol of promise, now feels fragile, almost provisional, suspended by forces beyond her control. The shockwaves ripple outward, striking hardest at Katie Spencer and Bill Spencer, who had mourned not just Luna, but the child they believed they had lost forever. For Katie, the revelation reopens a wound she had barely learned to carry without breaking. The grief of losing a grandchild is unlike any other. It is grief layered with helplessness, with the agony of watching one's own child suffer a loss no parent should have to endure. Katie had processed that grief as final, irreversible. To learn that the baby lives is both miraculous and cruel because it exposes the fact that her mourning was built on a lie, however unintended. Relief collides violently with anger, gratitude with betrayal. She must now reconcile the joy of life restored with the unbearable knowledge that she was denied the chance to know, to protect, to love. Bill's reaction is darker, more volatile. He has lived his life believing that power can control outcomes, that money and influence can bend reality into submission. Luna's deception, whether motivated by fear, survival, or desperation, cuts deeper than most betrayals because it proves there are losses he could not prevent and truths he could not buy. The knowledge that his grandson lived while he grieved him as dead ignites a fury rooted not only in pain but in wounded pride. Bill sees this not just as an emotional crime, but as an unforgivable violation of family sovereignty. Someone made a decision that robbed him of agency, of legacy, of time. That is a wound Bill Spencer does not forgive easily. Luna, however, is not the villain of her own story. Her return forces the audience and the characters to confront the uncomfortable truth that survival often demands moral compromise. She did not disappear to punish Will or manipulate his future. She vanished because she believed it was the only way to protect her child, to escape forces she felt powerless against. Motherhood has transformed her, sharpening her resolve and narrowing her focus to one imperative: her child's safety. When she stands before Will and Electra, she does not beg for acceptance or forgiveness. She asserts reality. This baby exists. This child has a father. And no amount of outrage or disbelief will erase that fact. Yet asserting reality does not absolve consequence. Luna's presence permanently alters the emotional architecture of every relationship in the room. Will's future is no longer solely his to promise. Every decision he makes from this moment forward must account for a child who will one day ask questions no one is prepared to answer. Electra's love is now tested not by betrayal, but by endurance, by whether she can imagine a life that includes a child conceived before her, carried in secret, and introduced into her world through shock rather than choice. The terror she feels is not irrational. It is rooted in the understanding that love alone may not be enough to survive this truth. As the celebration dissolves into stunned silence, the engagement itself becomes an open question rather than a certainty. Rings remain on fingers, but their meaning has shifted. Promises hang suspended, waiting for answers that cannot come quickly. Will must decide not only what kind of partner he will be, but what kind of father he is willing to become. Electra must confront whether she can love a man whose past now lives in the present, crying softly in another woman's arms. Katie and Bill must navigate the impossible task of embracing a miracle born from deception, of protecting a grandchild while reckoning with the anger that threatens to consume them. In this moment, the bold and the beautiful reaches one of its most profound truths, that love does not exist in isolation, and that the past, when denied, does not disappear. It returns with greater force. Luna's entrance does not simply shock. It exposes the fragile assumptions that allowed everyone else to move forward too easily. The child she carries is not just a plot twist, but a living embodiment of consequence, a reminder that life continues even when stories are interrupted. What follows this revelation will not be resolved through forgiveness alone. It will demand confrontation, sacrifice, and a redefinition of family itself. Will, Electra, Luna, Katie, and Bill are now bound by a truth none of them chose, yet all of them must face. In that shared reckoning lies the next chapter of devastation and transformation, one that will test whether love can survive not just betrayal, but reality itself. The mythology of the bold and the beautiful has always rested on a single, brutal truth. Chaos is never born in isolation. It arrives carrying history, intention, and evidence. When Luna reappears, she does not come merely as a woman presumed dead, nor solely as a mother protecting her child. She arrives as a catalyst, armed not only with revelation but with proof that forces everyone present to confront the uncomfortable reality that the danger threatening Will and Electra was never entirely gone. It was simply hiding in plain sight, wearing the face of friendship, patience, and carefully cultivated innocence. Luna's return does not just reopen old wounds, It exposes a rot that has been spreading quietly, unnoticed, through the foundations of trust itself. Until that moment, the world surrounding Will Spencer and Electra Forrester is structured around the belief that the worst is behind them. The cabin where they gather with Dylan is meant to be a refuge, a temporary suspension of conflict where laughter, youth, and shared history can create the illusion of safety. Dylan's presence there feels natural, even comforting. He has positioned himself as the quiet constant, the observer who listens more than he speaks, the ally who seems untouched by the betrayals and rivalries that define their families. In that space, trust feels effortless, almost deserved. Luna's arrival annihilates that illusion. She does not waste time with half-truths or emotional theatrics. The urgency in her demeanor is not born of desperation, but of calculation. Luna understands something crucial. Truth without evidence can be dismissed, reframed, or weaponized against the speaker. She therefore comes prepared, carrying tangible proof that what she is about to say cannot be undone by denial. Her first revelation lands like a controlled detonation. Dylan did not merely know about her disappearance. He helped engineer it. Whether driven by loyalty, fear, or self-interest, Dylan played an active role in allowing the world to believe Luna was dead. In doing so, he did not simply assist a lie. He altered the emotional trajectories of everyone connected to Will and Electra. The implications are devastating. The grief Will endured, the fear Electra learned to live with, the mourning of families who believed a life had ended, all of it is suddenly reframed as collateral damage in a deception that required planning, silence, and intent. Dylan's involvement transforms him from passive bystander into architect. The question is no longer whether he lied, but why he chose to do so, and what he stood to gain from Luna's erasure. As Luna speaks, another possibility emerges, darker and more corrosive. Her evidence suggests that Dylan's actions may not have been motivated by helping her survive at all. Instead, the deception appears to have served his own design, the slow, methodical dismantling of Will and Electra's bond during Luna's absence. With Luna removed from the equation, Dylan was free to position himself closer, to cultivate dependence, to study vulnerabilities without interference. His presence at the cabin, his proximity to Will and Electra, suddenly feels predatory rather than coincidental. What once appeared as loyalty now reads as surveillance. What seemed like concern begins to resemble strategy. For Will, the realization is paralyzing. The betrayal cuts deeper than Luna's disappearance ever could, because it implicates the present rather than the past. Dylan is not a memory, he is a presence. Will is forced to confront the possibility that the person he trusted during moments of doubt may have been subtly guiding those doubts all along. Every conversation, every shared silence, every piece of advice Dylan offered becomes suspect. Will's internal conflict intensifies as he struggles to reconcile the friend he believed in with the manipulator Luna describes. The pain lies not only in being deceived, but in recognizing how easily that deception succeeded. Electra's response is more visceral, driven by instinct rather than analysis. Her fear has always centered on losing agency, on being blindsided by truths revealed too late. Dylan's exposure confirms her deepest anxiety, that danger does not always announce itself with aggression. Sometimes it arrives disguised as patience. The idea that Dylan may have been exploiting Luna's absence to undermine her relationship with Will ignites a fury rooted in violation. Electra does not feel merely threatened, she feels invaded. The sanctuary of the cabin collapses around her, transforming from a place of refuge into a stage where manipulation unfolded unchecked. Luna's evidence removes Dylan's ability to control the narrative. Texts, recordings, timelines, each fragment aligns too precisely to dismiss. The consistency of the proof erodes any defense Dylan might attempt. His credibility disintegrates in real time, not through accusation alone, but through undeniable coherence. This is what terrifies Will and Electra most. If Dylan could sustain a lie of this magnitude while maintaining their trust, what else has been fabricated? Who else around them is wearing a mask? The fallout extends beyond the immediate circle. Trust, once fractured, does not isolate itself neatly. It spreads suspicion outward, infecting every relationship with doubt. Will begins to question not only Dylan's intentions, but his own judgment. Electra finds herself reassessing every alliance, every kindness, every silence she once interpreted as respect. Luna's return has not simply exposed one betrayal, it has destabilized the very framework through which they understand loyalty. Dylan's downfall is swift because it is total. There is no partial redemption in exposure of this scale. Whether he helped Luna fake her death out of misguided loyalty or orchestrated her disappearance for personal gain, the result is the same. He manipulated grief, weaponized absence, and positioned himself as indispensable while others suffered. The moral weight of that choice cannot be diluted by explanation. His credibility collapses not because he is accused, but because his actions align too cleanly with outcome. Yet Luna's role remains complex. She is not a hero in the traditional sense. Her own deception contributed to the harm inflicted on those she now confronts. But what distinguishes her is accountability. She does not deny the damage her disappearance caused. She acknowledges it, even as she insists that survival sometimes demands impossible choices. Luna's difference lies in her refusal to allow Dylan's duplicity to remain hidden. In revealing his role, she disrupts a cycle that would have continued indefinitely had she stayed silent. The emotional core of this revelation lies in its aftermath rather than its shock. Will and Electra are left standing in the wreckage of certainty, forced to rebuild trust not just with each other, but with themselves. The world they thought they understood now feels unreliable, populated by motives they failed to detect. This realization does not weaken their bond, it tests its resilience. Love, stripped of illusion, must decide whether it can survive reality unfiltered. As suspicion replaces comfort, one truth becomes unavoidable. Dylan was not an anomaly. He was a symptom. His success in deceiving those closest to him reveals how deeply the desire for safety can override vigilance. Luna's return, with evidence in hand, forces everyone to confront that vulnerability. The danger was never simply Dylan's darkness, it was the willingness of others to believe they were finally safe. In exposing that darkness, Luna changes the trajectory of every relationship in her orbit. The chaos she brings is not gratuitous. It is corrective. By shattering false peace, she makes genuine healing possible, though far more painful. The price of truth, in this world, is always destruction first. What remains after Dylan's unmasking is not clarity, but reckoning. Will and Electra must now decide how to move forward in a world where trust must be earned again, not assumed. Luna must face the consequences of her own choices while protecting the child whose existence drove them. And everyone involved must accept that safety is not a destination, but a discipline, one that requires vigilance, honesty, and the courage to confront darkness even when it wears a familiar face. In this chapter of The Bold and the Beautiful, the greatest threat is no longer hidden. It has been named, exposed, and dismantled. But the damage it caused lingers, reshaping relationships and redefining loyalty. The revelation does not end the chaos. It transforms it, turning uncertainty into awareness, and betrayal into a lesson none of them will ever forget. The moral universe of The Bold and the Beautiful has never been governed by innocence. It is shaped instead by impulse, power, fear, and the private moments people believe will never be heard by anyone else. What finally erupts into the open rarely begins as malice performed for an audience. It begins as unfiltered emotion spoken behind closed doors, words released in the mistaken belief that privacy grants immunity. Luna's most devastating weapon is not her return, not even the child she carries, but a secret recording that drags private revulsion into public judgment and exposes how easily grief can curdle into cruelty when no one is watching. Luna does not appear wielding rumor or accusation. She arrives with evidence. A recording captured in a moment when Bill Spencer and Katie Spencer believed themselves safe from consequence, reveals a side of their pain that even they might not recognize when confronted with it later. In the audio or video, their words are raw, venomous, stripped of diplomacy and restraint. They speak of Luna not as a human being, but as an intrusion, a threat, an obstacle they wish would simply vanish from their lives. Worse still, their disgust extends to the unborn child of Will Spencer, a baby whose existence they view not as a miracle, but as a curse that binds their family to a past they want erased. In isolation, those words are not difficult to understand. Bill and Katie believed they had lost a grandchild. They mourned that loss with genuine agony, absorbing it into the narrative of their lives as a tragedy that could never be undone. Luna's reappearance shattered that narrative, not with gentle revelation, but with brutal force. The shock of discovering that the baby lived, and that they were denied the chance to know, protect, or grieve properly, ignited emotions too volatile to process with grace. Their revulsion, when spoken, is born from helplessness rather than inherent malice. It is the sound of people lashing out at a reality they cannot control. But understanding emotion does not absolve expression, especially when expression leaves a permanent record. The moment Luna makes the recording public, the context that once shielded Bill and Katie evaporates. Their private anguish is transformed into public cruelty. The world does not hear grief, it hears condemnation. It does not hear shock, it hears rejection. The nuance of their pain is flattened into a single, damning narrative. Powerful grandparents wishing a vulnerable woman and an unborn child out of existence. In the court of public opinion, intention matters far less than impact, and the impact is immediate and unforgiving. For Bill Spencer, the consequences strike at the core of his identity. He has built his empire on the idea that power can outmaneuver consequence, that dominance allows mistakes to be buried or reframed. This time, there is no leverage strong enough to erase his own voice speaking words that cannot be unsaid. The recording circulates rapidly, igniting outrage not only from rivals, but from those who once respected him as a businessman willing to protect his family at all costs. The narrative shifts. Bill is no longer seen as a flawed patriarch reacting emotionally to crisis, but as a man whose instinct in the face of vulnerability is eradication rather than protection. Katie's fallout is even more complex because her public image has always rested on empathy and resilience. She is not known for cruelty. She is known for endurance, for surviving betrayal and illness with dignity intact. The recording fractures that image. Viewers, colleagues, and even loved ones struggle to reconcile the woman they believed Katie to be with the voice captured in the recording. Her pain is real, but the lack of compassion in her words feels like a betrayal of her own values. Katie is forced to confront the most terrifying realization of all, that grief did not merely wound her, it transformed her into someone she barely recognizes. Within the Spencer family, the damage is immediate and deep. Lines are drawn not by loyalty, but by conscience. Some family members defend Bill and Katie, insisting that private moments of despair should never be weaponized. Others argue that power demands accountability, and that the recording reveals truths long ignored about how the family responds when its control is threatened. The divide is not loud at first. It manifests in silence, in glances withheld, in conversations that stop abruptly when certain people enter the room. Trust fractures quietly before it breaks publicly. The timing of the scandal could not be worse. Bill and Katie's new business venture, already under scrutiny, now finds itself entangled in moral controversy. Investors hesitate. Partners question alignment. A brand built on reinvention and forward momentum becomes associated with exclusion and dehumanization. The irony is cruel. Just as Katie's professional identity steps out of the shadows of legacy, it is dragged back by a past moment she cannot undo. The recording does not merely damage reputations, it destabilizes the very future they are trying to build. Luna, for her part, is neither triumphant nor apologetic. Her decision to release the recording is not driven by vengeance alone. It is defensive, strategic, and deeply personal. She understands that narratives will form with or without her participation. If she remains silent, Bill and Katie's private revulsion may manifest in quieter, more dangerous ways: legal pressure, social erasure, financial intimidation. By exposing their words, Luna reclaims control of the story. She forces the world to see the hostility she and her child face, ensuring that any harm that follows will be visible, scrutinized, and condemned. Yet Luna is not spared judgment herself. Critics question her ethics, accusing her of exploiting private grief for public sympathy. They argue that releasing the recording escalates conflict rather than resolving it. Luna accepts this criticism with grim resolve. She knows that survival in this world demands visibility. Silence has never protected her. The recording is not a plea for sympathy, it is a shield, forged from truth, however ugly that truth may be. For Will, the situation becomes unbearable. He is caught between the grandparents who raised him and the child whose existence now defines his future. Hearing Bill and Katie's words forces him to confront the reality that love in his family has limits, and that those limits may extend to his own child. The pain is not abstract. It is immediate, visceral. Will must reconcile his loyalty to his family with his responsibility as a father, a role he cannot abandon without losing himself entirely. The emotional center of this scandal is not the recording itself, but what it reveals about fear. Bill and Katie's words are fueled by terror. Terror of losing control, terror of permanent attachment to a past they want erased, terror of being defined by a story they did not choose. Luna's release of the recording exposes that fear, stripping it of justification and forcing it into the light. The public reaction is not merely punitive, it is instructive. It demonstrates that pain, no matter how profound, does not grant the right to erase others. As the fallout continues, apologies are attempted, explanations offered, damage control initiated. But some fractures do not heal with statements or silence. The recording exists now as a permanent artifact of a moment when grief overpowered compassion. Bill and Katie must live not only with what they said, but with how it reshaped the way others see them and how they see themselves. In this storyline, the bold and the beautiful reaches into one of its most unsettling truths, that the greatest betrayals are often not acts of violence, but words spoken when we believe no one is listening. Luna's recording does not invent cruelty, it reveals it. And once revealed, it cannot be buried again. What follows is not redemption or ruin alone, but reckoning, a long, painful confrontation with the consequences of believing that private pain excuses public harm. In the end, the scandal does not belong solely to Bill, Katie, or Luna. It belongs to a family forced to confront the limits of its own compassion, to a business empire learning that reputation is as fragile as trust, and to a world where technology ensures that no moment is ever truly private again. The recording fades eventually from headlines, but its echo remains, reshaping relationships long after the sound stops playing.